As if injuries to running backs weren't too much to handle just a few weeks ago, what about now? This is Move Makers, brought to you by Norton and our Digital Dangers Everywhere. I'm Lauren Shehadi, alongside Jamey Eisenberg. Banged up running backs, banged up Redskins. A Redskin on this next list, Rock Cartwright. Does he have the chance to show what he really can do, and do fantasy owners have the chance to cash in?
Well, I think so. You know, when you're looking at this list, obviously a lot of these guys are probably owned when you talk about Justin Forsett, Jason Snelling, Bernard Scott, especially coming off the performances that we just saw. Now, Mike Bell and Fred Jackson, they get the chance to probably be at least considered, maybe even starting options in Week 12, because we know Reggie Bush missed Week 11, and Marshawn Lynch was carted off the field as well against Jacksonville with a shoulder injury. So you got to keep an eye on those two guys, which means that Bell, who had 2 touchdowns in Week 11 against Tampa Bay, and then Jackson, who we know the first 3 weeks played really well. But in terms of Rock Cartwright, he's the guy that you can go out and get because he's only owned, as you saw, in 1% of leagues. So, Lauren, when you're talking about Liddell Betts now being out for the year, and Clinton Porter's probably out for at least another week, maybe 2, Rock Cartwright, anytime you're going to look at a running back that's going to get probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20, if not more carries, you want to at least stash that on your bench. And when the matchup's right, I don't know if this is the week against the Philadelphia defense, but maybe when the matchup's right, you can start a guy like Cartwright, especially if Clinton Porter remains out with this concussion. Okay, you mentioned only owned in a few % of leagues, and these guys on this next list, you told me before the video, grab them up, but only look at that, 10%, 7%, and 7%. Yeah, you're talking about 3 guys that have the chance to maybe get a lot of carries because the guys in front of them are getting opportunities that they may not have been expecting earlier this year, or at least have the chance if they get injured. When you talk about a guy like Lex Hilliard, now is the number 2 option for Ricky Williams with Ronnie Brown out for the season, so he could have some value, maybe somebody worth stashing. You look at Leonard Weaver with LaShawn McCoy, the starter. Weaver's getting some additional carries as long as Brian Westbrook remains out, and that could be for the rest of the season. And then Rashad Jennings is the interesting one because earlier this season, I don't know if we ever talked about it on video, but Dave and I have had this discussion throughout the course of the year with Bernard Scott and Rashad Jennings, 2 guys that if the starter got hurt, they would have a significant upgrade. We see it now with Scott, and if Maurice Jones-Drew gets hurt, Jennings could then be the next guy to step up and play well. So if you have the opportunity, definitely if you have Maurice Jones-Drew, you want to go out and get Jennings now. Okay, so those 7 and 10% could definitely go up. Absolutely, they should go up. All right, let's talk about who we are adding. We are adding Jermichael Finley. Why? Because Aaron Rodgers looks at him, and Jamey, he looks at him a lot. Yeah, 10 targets last week coming back from the knee injury, and fantastic matchup in Week 12 against Detroit. You'll see another tight end on here as well, Kevin Boss. As we know, the last game he had 2 touchdowns against Atlanta. Somebody definitely worth picking up. But I don't know if you're going to start him this week. But again, he's one of those tight ends that you can mix and match. If you want to carry 2 tight ends, that's definitely somebody you can look at. Chris Chambers, as we know, with Dwayne Bowe out for 4 games, is going to be the number 1 guy there for the Chiefs, for Matt Castle, and he's facing his former team in Week 12. And then, Lauren, you know, it's interesting because Robert Meacham's a guy that's got a lot of attention because of his touchdowns. 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. He's a great red zone target. Now, the key is if Lance Moore is out, Robert Meacham becomes very good. And as we've seen, Lance Moore continues to deal with this ankle injury. Robert Meacham scores touchdowns. And Boss has had a few touchdowns as well. Yep. Okay, let's talk about Brady Quinn, because he has not played well. But he did play well last game, 4 touchdown passes. You don't expect that to continue. No, I don't expect that to continue. And I think you're looking at a guy in Brady Quinn. That was only his 3rd game in 6 appearances where he's been over 100 yards passing. So I don't think that's going to continue. And let's face it, he played against Detroit. Everybody does well against Detroit. Bruce Gradkowski is interesting because if you're looking for somebody in 2 quarterback leagues, then I think you go out and pick him up because I do think that he's going to be the best quarterback that Oakland's seen, maybe since Kerry Collins and maybe even going back further to Rich Gannon. But Jamarcus Russell's not going to get this job back, and we're seeing guys like Zach Miller, Lewis Murphy. You know, they don't have great weapons, but the weapons that they do have, Gradkowski's getting them the ball. And then you see Khalil Bell on this list, and we've talked about handcuffing running backs with some of those other guys. I just don't see Khalil Bell pushing Matt Forte for carries, and as we know, Forte has struggled this year. You don't necessarily need to have the second option there. You know what I needed? I needed Westbrook, and I needed him bad this season, and he hasn't really been there like I needed him to. So, Jason Avant, a stud. What do you make of it? Yeah, he's playing really well at this point. You know, you see him 10% as a scout. If you need a receiver, I think he's somebody to add as long as Westbrook is out, because you're talking about a situation where they need someone to step up in the receiving game. LaShawn McCoy is a very solid running back, can do it all. But they're using Avant the last 2 games with Westbrook not being there as that receiver, not necessarily out of the backfield, but just as another option. He had a screen pass for a touchdown last week, and you saw it the week before against San Diego, 156 yards receiving, just starting to play well, and we know that Donovan McNabb will spread the ball around, so if Avant's available, pick him up now. Brandon Gibson, even with the injury to Mark Bulger, a guy that's been targeted quite a bit, somebody you can maybe keep an eye on there. And then David Thomas, pushing Jeremy Shockey for production as the tight end there for the Saints. So another guy to keep an eye on, and if this continues, maybe you pick him up and start him. All right, keep an eye on all of it to take your fantasy team to such great heights. For Jamey Eisenberg, I'm Lauren Shehadi. We'll see you soon.